I spent about 15 years in startups leading marketing and growth. So oftentimes joining companies super early stage, like marketing hire number one and helping to build companies from there. So saw a lot of pre-seed, seed stage companies and helped to grow them to Series A, Series B companies and had wild rides at a bunch of different companies. There's definitely real reasons for why I wanted to leave tech and very genuine, honest reasons for why I wanted to do food. I think it started with what were my motivations to go into tech in the first place. A lot of it was about proving myself. I didn't know myself as well as I do now, and I felt this need to get external validation from the people around me. And when I think about food, it's simple. I just love serving people food, putting smiles on their faces, giving them joy. And I also love the creativity of food, which I was kind of getting in startups, but this just feels like an actual art form. And so I think that was one of the things that pushed me away as well, is just with food, it just simplifies everything. There's no desire to scale to however many restaurants. It's just my dream is to just have, a small restaurant where people come and I remember them and I know them and we just have a good relationship. It's let's just get to the basics of feeding people, making them happy, helping them have nice moments in their day.
Everyone says success means climbing higher, bigger roles, bigger exits, and scaling as fast as you can. But for Peter, the real breakthrough came when he slowed down, quit tech, and started making lasagna for strangers. After 15 years leading growth for early-stage startups, Peter hit pause. On his 34th birthday, he reflected and realized the path ahead no longer sparked his curiosity. And so he left it. No plan, no roadmap, just a hunch that food, his childhood passion, might hold the key to something more aligned with his future. Since then, he's worked in Berlin's kitchens, studied in Italy, and launched Kenzy Club, a series of intimate pop-ups and supper clubs. And along the way, he's defining for himself what it means to build a life you're proud of. If you're wondering what it might look like to step off the well-worn path, or whether it's okay to outgrow a dream, this conversation is for you. In a world obsessed with career optimization, Peter reminds us that sometimes the best plan is having no plan at all. I'm Nick Blackman, and this is Final. Well, Peter, thank you so much for joining me on the show. It's so exciting that you agreed to this, first of all. As we were talking the last time, I came across your LinkedIn post where you're sharing about this big career step. I won't share it because I don't want to steal your thunder that you've taken. And I was just so inspired by the story and how you're stepping out and taking risks and pursuing dreams that I just had to reach out to you. And you so graciously agreed to hang out and chat.
Thanks for reaching out. I'm really excited to be able to share, and it's been really great just getting to know you and having the initial chats as well. So I think having these conversations also just helps me take some time and reflect a little bit on, the journey so far. So it's really excited to be on the show.
Well, I've gotten to know you a little bit. I'd love for you to share a little bit about just who you are. Really whatever you'd like to share in that regard. Doesn't need to be just professional. Can just share a bit about yourself and the journey you've been on, and maybe I already teased the big step that you've taken, so maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So my name is Peter. Originally, I grew up in Canada on the West Coast in Vancouver. And after about high school, I moved kind of further out east, just outside of Toronto for university. I went to Western. And I guess maybe something worth touching on, I never really I wasn't sure what career I wanted to end up in. And in university, I actually switched programs every single year I was in school. So I started in biomed because I was a good science student, and that just seemed that's the smart thing to do. And then I switched into psychology, and then I was pre-accepted into the business program, Ivy, and decided not to go, and then ended up in music, and then graduated with a business degree. So somehow my first year uh, chemistry classes converted into calculus classes, and I just went to my dean and I'm like, I'm not meant to be in school, and help me kind of get out of here. And somehow I was able to kind of get out in about 4.5 years, which was great.
Wow.
Luckily enough, when I was in school, I found startups. And so out of my university and just somehow kind of ended up in a entrepreneurial circle where a lot of friends were actually leaving school to start their own businesses. I was part of this kind of student entrepreneurial organization called Impact. And a lot of people who were part of this volunteer organization were starting their own companies. And I found that really exciting. And it kind of moved me away from like doing things that were super theoretical into like really just going out and going into the world. And so I fell into startups kind of fortuitously. And then because I was in that community, that kind of landed me my first few jobs in out of school. And then I spent about 15 years in startups leading marketing and growth. So oftentimes joining companies super early stage, like marketing hire number one, and helping to build companies from there. So saw a lot of kind of pre-seed, seed stage companies, and helped to kind of grow them to Series A, Series B type companies, and had like wild rides at a bunch of different companies, and saw everything. Companies that were built really thoughtfully, companies that built really, really fast, and had a really good career there. But then about a year ago, I kind of came to the realization that it was time for a shift, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, now I'm in food and kind of following a long time passion that I've had since I was super young. So excited for this new chapter in my life.
So awesome. You didn't even share all that detail with me the last time that we talked in preparation for this. And I identify so much with that journey as well. I studied like 3 different majors, I feel like, before I finally landed on actually a business degree, and studied art. And now I'm in a creative agency. So it's just kind of funny the different ways that all these things blend together. Who would have thought I'd end up in a business and art intersection of sorts? It sounds like you've kind of found your way through that journey as well.
Yeah, and I think like maybe the one thing I've been grateful for in terms of just how I approached that was just not just following the standard path and like not accepting like, hey, I chose this, so I have to do it. To question and to be curious and to, consciously make a choice if it's not the right fit. So I think in a lot of those programs, it was like, man, the top student sitting in the front of the class was always asking questions. It was like running to the library, studying afterwards, and was just super enthusiastic about whether it was science or psych or music or everything. And I was like, man, I didn't have that. I didn't feel the same way that they did about that topic. And I was like, how am I ever going to succeed in life and kind of carve out my own part of the workplace if I don't feel the same way as these other people? So I think I found that in startups, and now I definitely find that in food too. So yeah.
Awesome. Which, yeah, I'd love to kind of pivot into that a little bit. When we talked last, you mentioned that it was your 34th birthday is kind of when you had this moment, and you kind of realized, that what you were doing, you didn't necessarily feel aligned to continue doing. And you made this pretty big leap into pursuing a dream and career in food. And yeah, I would just love for you to share a little bit about like, what was that moment? You might even know the specific details of like what you were doing when you suddenly had that thought. And yeah, what was that like considering such a big move, especially going from, probably a pretty lucrative career? Yeah. What went through your head? What was it like making that decision? Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe to start, food has been something that has been a love for a long time. And I'd always kind of had these pipe dreams about, oh, like, why don't I go into food? Food's been in my family for a while. Actually, my sister had thought about leaving her career to go into food. And that was very quickly turned down by my dad at the time. He was like, no, that's not a good idea. and I think she was a little bit younger than when I made the transition. And I think maybe perhaps she felt more like she was running away from something versus running toward something. But just to say that, like, I had thought about food for a while, but I never thought that that was actually going to happen. It felt like, this was just a dream and that it was irresponsible somehow because, it's a hard life. Everyone says, like, you lose, it's just like really stressful. It's toxic. You hear all these things about food and it's not good pay, all these reasons why you shouldn't do it. So I thought about it, but it was never a real thing until I think I moved to Berlin. And that shift helped open my eyes to how people in Berlin specifically were really making choices around their lives to do the thing that they felt like they were supposed to do in life, that they were called to do in life versus what they were expected to do. And back home in Canada, I feel like there's a lot of pressure, even though it's unspoken sometimes, to do the thing that you're expected to do. Go get the job, go get the better title, the better salary, then afford the house, then have the family. Like there's just this pressure in Toronto, I think, to kind of follow that path. And I think in Berlin, it was the first time that I was exposed to a lot of people who were just living very alternative lifestyles. And so that kind of planted all the seeds. And then it was actually a very quick decision. Like I turned 34, it was around my birthday, and I was like, I did a little, I had some kind of, thought process or I just imagined myself. I was like, I've just turned 34. Where am I kind of headed in life? I've spent 15 years kind of doing startups and it's been really good to me, but what do the next 15 years look like? And it's kind of continuing down that path of getting the bigger title. Maybe I become a VP or CMO of a company or whatnot. And I could just, because I'd been in the industry for so long, I could imagine what that would be like. And it just wasn't something that really I was that curious about and that excited to do. And so I was like, man, it's time for me to kind of make a change. From the moment I had that doubt and that shift in thinking to, hey, I'm just going to take a year off to explore what I actually really deeply love. I think I had come across people in life who had found something that they really loved, and every day didn't feel like work. They could do 15 to 20 hours or 15 to 18 hours or whatever, just like nonstop. And it still feels, that they can do it and that they're excited to do it. And I definitely didn't feel that way about startups. And food was the best guess I had at living a life like that. And so I kind of started taking some steps in that direction. Just spending time doing the thing I loved. And it happened very organically that I sort of navigated my way further into different types of opportunities to the point now, about a year later, where I'm now starting my own kind of exploring different food projects that are actually kind of my own business.
So awesome. Did you even with the realization that you had of, which I love what you kind of connected there of you were drawing some conclusions similar to what you were thinking in college about the careers that you might end up in and needing to have that kind of curiosity. Paul Graham, the Y Combinator founder, he talks about like having things that you're like easily and excessively curious about in order to do great work, which it feels like you kind of have that same like mentality and desire to what you pursue.
And a dwindling curiosity in tech and startups as well. Like everyone around me was really enthusiastic about how AI was going to change their life, make them more productive. And it seemed like in order for me to continue in my career and to compete, that somehow, having this deep curiosity about how to fit AI into my work was going to be important. And I just honestly did not feel that level of curiosity. I really didn't care. And I almost was, I was like, man, how am I going to compete if I don't feel that anymore? And so it's, trying to find the thing where I do feel curious. And I think, there's also a couple of years ago, I'd taken this sabbatical from work. I guess it was 2021, something like this. And during that time, I actually wrote out a list of personal values. So ways that I wanted to live my life, kind of guides, if you will, to reference back to know if I'm living my life the way that I would like. Kind of like company values, but for myself. And so there were 4 of them. One was make today count, which is kind of a mindset around urgency and that, things are limited and that you really want to make the most of decisions that you make and opportunities and things like this. There was another one called color outside the lines, which to me is kind of this childlike way of phrasing, don't just follow the structures that you're given. Try and figure out sort of like what else there is out there, kind of challenge the norms and take risks in life and build your own path. There was another one around basically leading with your heart. So all the decisions that you make in life, always try and lead with kindness and generosity, because I really believe that that was a better way of just orienting yourself. And then the last one was around seeking the truth. So what is true about myself? What is true about, the world? And really not trying to just, I think you need to have that curiosity in life to try and find things that are actually true. And so I feel like this color outside the lines and seeking the truth were really helpful. Now that I look back, like I was living to make this decision to go into food, I think I think it really aligns with some of these values that I wrote actually like a couple of years before that. So that's a good kind of reminder and vote of confidence that I'm headed in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it sounds like you've had a lot of time to reflect, which has led to the decision you've made versus just kind of all of a sudden drawing a conclusion and jumping into it. Even though it took, I'm sure, that leap and that risk still to even just take like the year off from work and pursue other things that you felt curious about. Were there, other voices of doubt that kind of were there as you were making that initial leap and starting to explore things that you were excessively and easily curious about, like food?
I mean, I definitely had, there's the conventional things that you hear about food, which is, very toxic, crazy work hours, crappy pay. What is it, like a fraction of restaurants that open and not too dissimilar from startups, actually. Like,
yeah, that's thinking the same thing.
Not working. So maybe the startup path prepared me for the restaurant path.
Yeah, well, pretty similar.
I don't know if I want to go into restaurants, but that's another story. But I had all of these, ideas about what it meant to go into food and not a real concrete plan. I think more recently my life has been way more about just following the flow of things, which means there's no plan. I'm almost anti-plan. And so there's just a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainty. And thankfully I had a really supportive family. Asian parents aren't known to be, supportive in this way. Oftentimes they're like, go get the lawyer job, go get the safe doctor job and this kind of stuff. And they thought they didn't have to worry about me, my parents. But they've been so supportive of just kind of like the decisions I've made. And obviously they're still worried because they're like, we can't see what's ahead. And so I carried that as well. It's like, these are people that I really trust as support systems in my life. And they also had doubt. They weren't sure. And so I knew that I was doing something that really felt right, on the inside, however mushy that sounds, but I needed to kind of collect more information. And so I think that's what I used the first, kind of 6 months after I quit to do. It's like, I have some data points that tell me, hey, if there's something I love in life, it's food. I need to kind of explore it. But there's also a lot of unknowns. Like, how do I actually feel about the work? If I do it 12 hours standing up, really crazy work, how do I actually feel? People tell me it's crap. Do I actually feel like crap? The lifestyle and like how toxic it is, all these things. Like, there's secondary information, secondhand information. And so the first 6 months for me was like, how do I collect the primary information so that I know for me whether or not that's true? And so I think it's like you can only know so much when you're thinking through things. You just have to get into it and see. And so, I've spent sort of this first 6 months working at different pop-ups, different restaurants in Berlin. And actually, with that primary information, felt more excited than ever to continue down the path. And maybe I'm still, 1 year later in this honeymoon phase, but every day I'm in it is a little bit more information to tell me whether or not I should stay in it or not. And I guess so far it's been telling me to keep going. Mm-hmm. And I'm just listening to that, I guess.
You shared at one point when we talked last about having, I've been thinking of it as like a burn the bridges type of moment almost, where burn the boats is what I meant. Of like, there's no way to go back from what you've done. I think the way you related that was actually more about just wanting to feel aligned and like you could bring yourself fully to the type of work that you wanted to pursue. But you kind of had that moment of realizing, I don't think I can go back to tech. I'd love for you to share a little bit more about like what that moment was like when you kind of had been on this journey for a while and you started to realize, okay, I do actually love what I'm doing. Or it is at least given me the clarity to know that what I was doing previously is not something that I want to go back to. And I'm continuing along on this journey to keep discovering what I want to do. What was that like for you?
Yeah, there's definitely real reasons for why I wanted to leave tech, and very genuine, honest reasons for why I wanted to do food. I think it started with just like, what were my motivations to go into tech in the first place? I think that a lot of it was about proving myself. I kind of had this, I didn't know myself as well as I do now. And I felt this need to get external validation from the people around me. And it was, intoxicating to like, say like, hey, I was part of this startup. It was super cool. And like this startup is now making however millions of dollars. And like, hey, I joined this rocket ship, blah, 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 that like grew to $1 billion company and whatever it was, right? Like, I think all of that was cool to say. Oh, first, like I was just motivated by like all of this external validation. I was motivated by my ambition. I was motivated by money, and it was a lot of these things that felt like over time mattered less to me. And when I think about food, it's simple. It's like I just love serving people food, putting smiles on their faces, giving them joy. And I also like love the creativity of food, which I was kind of getting in startups, but like this just feels like an actual art form. Marketing is not an art form, but food to me feels like I can actually express who I am to the fullest on a plate of food, share that with someone and have them experience kind of who I am. And so I think the drivers were really different. There's also just like, I feel like in startups, I started to develop, this kind of more jaded view on startups, especially venture-backed companies. I worked at a bunch of different companies, some with great cultures, some with really toxic cultures. But in every case, I found that, being a venture-backed company from the start means that you're very fueled to make money. That's the purpose. It's about making money for investors. And many, many times I saw that companies were just forced to grow and not necessarily having that much freedom to ask the question, like, should we grow? Do we actually have a product that is like valuable enough to grow? And so when I was sitting in this like early stage growth role, oftentimes I was just manufacturing fake value. I was like selling stuff that people do they really need it? I don't know. Like that shouldn't be a question. I shouldn't have doubt if they really need it. It's like I was constantly questioning, and we were like, doing sales and discounts, or like, let's send them, like, instead of sending them 5 emails a month, let's send them like 30 emails a month, because every single impression is an opportunity to sell. Like, all of this stuff that just felt not like actually creating value. It was just like, hey, I know growth tactics that can drive a graph up and to the right. Even for companies where I, aligned with the mission, it just often felt like I didn't feel fully proud of like the value that I was creating for other people. And I questioned that more and more as I stayed in the career. And so I think that was one of the things that pushed me away as well, is just with food, it just simplifies everything. There's no desire to like scale to however many restaurants. It's just like, my dream is to just have, like a small restaurant where people come and I remember them and I know them, and we just have like a good relationship, and I can, not worry about my financial stability. That's now the goal, is just like, can I just like build a living? And it's no longer this like ambition, like, oh, like with food, it's not about like the Michelin stars for me or whatever. It's like, let's just get to the basics of feeding people, making them happy, helping them have like, nice moments in their day. And I feel that way, way more in food than I ever did in startups.
I think you described it as like pursuing a sustainable lifestyle versus like a scalable one. You kind of kept using some of that tech startup language.
Lingo, yeah.
Yeah, I really.
It's not fully out of my system yet.
It's kind of interesting, which you'd even mentioned. Kind of getting into some of how you've pursued food. You had like a little bit of an MVP type of approach to how you were doing that, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about how you even chose some of the restaurants and chefs that you worked at. Because I thought that was really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Just how you got in, how you got started, some of the pop-ups you were doing, and just kind of those like first 6 months, maybe after culinary school, which I guess we didn't even talk on that yet too. You went to culinary school in Italy. I'd love for you to share about.
Maybe I'll quickly just like in the year since quitting my job. So a few markers. I spent maybe like the first. I didn't have a plan. Let's start there. And I think I said this earlier, but I'm very anti-plan these days.
Yeah,
I actually feel like oftentimes life can be easier, but we make it harder. And obviously there's exceptions around that, but I think too often we try and control things that we can't control. We come up with this plan of how life needs to go in order for us to feel happy. We set goals around that. And then what we end up doing is ignoring anything that doesn't fit that plan. And I think that there's actually way more abundance of opportunities that can be amazing for you. But because you've placed a judgment or an idea of what your plan is, you start to select what fits and what doesn't fit. And so when you just kind of like take a step back and just be present to how you're feeling, for instance, like a lot of this kind of comes with like the spiritual growth and just kind of learning to be more present in life. Like the more aware you are of yourself, how you're feeling, whether something makes you curious or not, the better kind of suited, or the more kind of you're in a good position to notice things that are good for you that you should explore. And so I kind of was approaching life in this way, and started by just like doing things that I love, like I knew I loved to do. So the purpose of this year was to do food. So I just started cooking. I just started making content and cooking, and I had all these recipes that I wanted to try that I hadn't tried. And so I was just cooking a lot at home and making content and just kind of like doing what I love to do. So that was a starting point. And then I was just randomly came by this pop-up concept that was making, the best pad thai in Berlin is what they stated. I went and tried, and I agreed that it was the best pad thai in Berlin. And I was like, wow, this is really good. I would love to learn how to make this. And it was just like I messaged them on Instagram, and it turned out, hey, like we actually are looking for someone. We're running another pop-up, and so we would love the extra help. And so it wasn't like I'm going to go and apply to a bunch of different restaurants. I just reached out to one person, and they're like, hey, let's meet for coffee. We met for coffee. And then the next day I was, working at a pop-up, which I didn't imagine it to be that easy. I was like, man, I needed to like have kitchen experience or whatever. So I did that. And then the next one I worked at was similar. Like my parents were visiting. We went for brunch, loved it. I was like, man, these people really know what they're doing. It's like elevated brunch. It feels like very refined. And I got a chance to go and work with these chefs who were super young, but had worked at Michelin star restaurants. And it was some of the best training that I had. I worked there for 2 months. And then after that, I went to culinary school in Italy for 3 months, which was amazing. Small town in Italy called Caminia. It's like population of like, I don't know, in the low hundreds. So there's nothing else to do except cook. Fell in love with Italian food. And then I came back, and since then I've been doing sort of my own food stuff. So I've been doing separate clubs at my place. Just had my first pop-up last weekend, which was super successful. So now I'm just kind of, again, still taking a step back, exploring different food projects and seeing, okay, what do I enjoy doing? What gives me energy? Because all of this is about kind of finding that right mix. And it's, listening to what feels right, paying attention to what doesn't, and just trying to build based on that instead of, feeling like you have to follow some specific predetermined thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'd mentioned that you were earlier that you were a little worried what it might be like working in a restaurant, working with chefs. Is going to be an intense environment. Other people say that it's not necessarily fun or enjoyable, but maybe you would feel different. How are you feeling? What was it like, working in a professional kitchen for the first time, especially with, Michelin chefs?
Yeah, I think so. Starting point, I think I consciously decided to work in kitchens that were women led, which maybe there's like some bias there, but I just felt like there was a higher chance that those kitchens would have less toxicity because men just suck. And so that I say conscious, like I think it was kind of conscious. Like it definitely made it the opportunity feel right.
Yeah. Might have been some of what drew you to those people as well.
Yeah. And I mean, like the first pop-up I was working at, we were doing pad thai, and at times, so I was thrown into the deep end, no kitchen experience, but by like the third or fourth day, the chef was like, hey, I want you to do all the pad thai for service today. And that was like, in that day, I probably plated over 150 portions of pad thai. And in some at busy hours, you're doing 12 pad thai at the same time, and you've got 4 woks going that are like super high heat. It's like hot, intense heat in a kitchen. And these woks were also incredibly heavy. And so by the first day I'd done that, I had my thumbs turned into baseballs because they were so swollen from holding these woks. And for the rest of the pop-up, I had to like pop painkillers in order to be able to continue holding these woks. And I loved it. Like I loved doing that. I loved like cleaning after, like, doing the dishes, like sticking around after to clean. There was just this like energy of just like doing things with your hands that I just I kind of, it was a bit addictive. It just felt like the energy I wanted to be around. And as I've worked more in kitchens or just like worked at restaurants and stuff, like I actually love a lot of the work. But they've always been pop-ups. So like to do that sustainably over a year just feels like a lot. That restaurant actually has since started their own restaurant, which is super successful. But it's also taken over their entire life. And so those are kind of the things that I'm kind of like, okay, maybe that's not for me. It's not that I don't love it, but it's just, at this point in my life, also care about balance. And I don't want one part of my life to kind of take over everything. And so that's kind of where I've landed with kind of potential, like not doing kitchens, I don't think. But in terms of like the work itself, it was great. Like I love doing it. The only thing that was tricky was just having very different schedules from my friends. And so like when there's 2 months when I was working at this pop-up where my weekends were weekdays and their weekdays were or whatever it is. It was just flipped. So we just never
Yeah.
saw each other, which made it really hard. So yeah, that also kind of was something that I was outside of the kitchen, but in the kitchen, I actually really in love. Like, it's like, here's a kilo of onions, learn how to chop this or like chop these onions for us. And like, for me, it turned into this game of like, okay, last time I did it in like an hour. Well, now I'm going to do it in like 40 minutes. And the next time I'm going to do it in like 30 minutes or whatever. And it's like, how do I make the process more efficient? How do I make the end quality better? And so there's this kind of like, I kind of gamified it and then I enjoy doing that. So yeah.
Has some of that, like, the feeling of, I'm not sure if I want to continue to work in restaurants, you want to pursue a more sustainable lifestyle, be with friends and continue investing in relationships. Has some of that led to what you're doing now or some of what you're doing now with the
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Like supper clubs just felt like, they're like, I think there's this emerging window in food around, pop-ups, supper clubs, private catering, private events, this type of stuff. And I'm seeing more and more examples of that, like creating content. So these are kind of restaurant adjacent food careers or ways of kind of making a living. And I think there's more to come. And there's, this is kind of what I mean in terms of building, with while being present. It's like I did a pop-up yesterday or not yesterday, on Sunday. And I have friends, who are like, yeah, we live in New York and we'd love to like, we'd actually think about hosting you, like flying you out to New York and doing a private event for our company.
Cool.
And so like things like that, it's like, okay, that sounds interesting. Maybe I could do that. And like, you can kind of, when you're paying attention to these different types of things, there's opportunities around that aren't like, let's take on all the risk of starting a restaurant and, losing your whole life to that. So, I mean, I still haven't gotten to the point yet where, all the numbers are making sense, but I see concrete, ways to continue moving forward down this path where the math starts to work.
Yeah, you're treating it like an entrepreneur would.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the name Kenzy Club?
It's actually named after my niece, Mackenzie.
Cool.
She just turned 6. It's crazy. But from a very young age, she loved food, like love food. And, I think at like 4 or 5, like her favorite food consistently is like charcuterie. She loves a good cheese board.
Nice.
She can name like 7 to 8 different types of cheese. Yeah. So she just like, and when I was back home, for Christmas, we cooked together and, it's just a really fond memory for me. So, yeah, I decided to name Kenzie after her. And, yeah, if you go on the Instagram, there's like some videos of her. Like we did like a little Mackenzie and Peter cooking show when I was back.
Awesome.
And, yeah. So that's the reason.
I didn't see this yet. I need to check that out. I did see the lasagna that you made. Like this, that was just a couple days ago, actually, right? For the supper club.
Yeah, the pop-up was on Sunday at a wine bar in Berlin. And yeah, we sold out by like 8:30 at night. So it went really well. And I'm hyped. I want to do more of them. So
that's awesome. So that one was not in your own kitchen. You kind of branched out and were in a different space.
Yeah. So there's this place, every Sunday, there's like a rotating pop-up that goes in and uses the space there. I did a lot of the cooking at home, which is tough when you're cooking for like 80 to 100 people in your home kitchen. It starts to break down. But I managed to do all of it, like all the prep in my home kitchen. And then I moved the stuff there and kind of finished the dishes there because they didn't have a full kitchen for you to use. But yeah, lasagna, everyone loves like a good lasagna, but we made like a little spin on it. and I think it was super tasty. So
Yeah.
yeah.
You did. I think you described it as like a smash burger of lasagna.
Yeah. So if you like normal lasagna, that you think about that your grandma makes is like, 2 or 3 layers in this like aluminum tray or whatnot. But I had seen actually this concept in Toronto from this restaurant called La Palma. And they kind of stacked many, many layers of lasagna. It's like maybe like in total, there's like maybe 30, 40, 50 sheets of lasagna. And so it's much, much taller. But what you end up doing is you kind of slice it really thin. And so you see this cross section of all these layers of lasagna. And La Palma kind of had these as like 1-inch slices. But I was doing some testing with my friends. This is kind of like the iterative startup approach. Like I had like what do you call those? Like focus group come over to my place and like they were tasting. We're like, what could be different? What could make this better? And they're like, what we love about this is like the crispy burnt edges of a lasagna. Like those are the things that I love. And so we're like, how do we maximize that? It's like, okay, well, if we cut it thinner, then you're kind of increasing the crispy crust to pasta ratio. And so we decided to kind of like make it much thinner. And so it's like a smash burger, literally, where you like similar to a burger. If you just have like the edges around a burger, then it's different than if you have a smash burger, which is like ultimate kind of like Maillard effect or whatever it is. And so we slice it super thin. We kind of like press it on a pan and sear it for service. And it's tasty. It's like my favorite lasagna.
It looked incredible.
Although I might be biased, but yeah.
How are you currently? You mentioned a little bit trying to make the numbers work with what you're pursuing. How are you thinking about balancing that business side of things with just a desire to pursue creative passion and experiment? Since it sounds like even though food is where you've landed, that really feels like is the thing for this season. It's just letting yourself be free, not have a plan, experiment, explore.
It is much easier to do that having started my career in startups and tech. And so I think I'm really fortunate to kind of have had the initial career to fund the current exploration, because I think that, money is a real pressure. Finances are a real pressure. And that really starts to make it hard to have space to think creatively and to make choices that might be best for you long term, but in the short term, really kind of make it hard for you to live your life. And so I'm really fortunate to have kind of, worked in startups and had some favorable sort of exits at different companies. And so that currently is kind of funding my exploration guts to actually go down this path. I have a lot of admiration for people who, are like paycheck to paycheck exploring their passion. Like that just feels like, man, like I have a lot of admiration for people who do that and choose to do that, because as much as like people say, wow, it's so cool for you to have been taking this risk. At the end of the day, I'm like, it's a risk, but it's not like I still can land on my feet for a while. And so I feel like it's a risk, but it's not as big. It's not nearly as big of a risk as like other people. And so, that's kind of given me the space to just like take my time, to not have to like move out of this flat, for instance. Like there's a lot of realities that other people are facing, which I kind of have been able to take my time through. And I'm grateful for that, because I think it's just allowing me to not rush into things and not feel like I have to kind of, take maybe slower paths of there's a lot of people who are like, okay, well, I have to earn an income while I explore this creatively. And so like that oftentimes might slow your progression towards where you want to be long term. So I feel like, I don't feel like I have to rush, and I feel like I can, be in this headspace to actually, move through this in the right ways or in the easier ways.
Mm-hmm. Is that changing a bit about how you're thinking about this season being successful, that you don't have that pressure? Like, do you have a hope or a desire for what this might lead towards? How you're pursuing creative passion and desires and trying to find a sustainable future for yourself that you feel aligned with and that you can bring yourself fully to, especially since you're saying already like, well, I'm not sure if like opening a restaurant or pursuing the kind of like chef's career is what you have in mind. You're kind of forging your own path here. Like, how are you thinking about feeling like, oh, that was a successful season or period of my life? Like, I'm excited about the changes I made and where it's led me. And I feel good about, where I've ended up, so that you're not having that dreaded moment again at 34, of looking back and being like, I don't think I see myself doing this much longer.
Yeah. And by the way, I would say that like I don't regret having been in startups, and I think I feel a lot of gratitude for having gone through and had the career there and the success I found there. But it was just kind of an adjustment based on me changing as a person, what I wanted from life changing. And so I do feel like the shift happened at the right time. But in terms of like how I'm thinking about like success, it's, I mean, I don't have like OKRs and goals. It's not so measurable. It's kind of a feeling. I mean, with this stuff, like I feel like, somehow I feel like I'm moving pretty fast, but I'm letting like we said earlier, curiosity lead the way, and like positive emotions sort of drive all of this forward. I mean, I just got back in April, and since April, so in May and June, I did 8 supper clubs. So very quickly coming home, I made the transition to actually start earning money through food, which was a first. And then this past Sunday was the first time I kind of did that for a large group of people. I probably served maybe just under 100 people, something like that. So that was also a big shift. And so it feels like things are actually progressing quite quickly, but it's the energy around it is not like stress and I like urgency from like a negative place. It's like, I just want to be doing it. And I'm just kind of like following it's easy because I'm following where my energy is naturally flowing. And so I can't see much further ahead than like where I am right now. I think success is just, to me, is just continuing to be present in this seat and paying attention, and not necessarily like, maybe there's a chance I decide as well. Like I want to create space for like, this doesn't have to be the path where I go down, right? Like every day I'm just kind of asking myself like, what feels right, and listening to that. And right now it feels like food, but doesn't mean that like, just because I've, said to everyone, hey, I'm going down the food path, that like I'm stuck going down this path. It could very well be something else. It could very well be going back for maybe a different set of reasons. Although going back is the hard thing, because I think I have the most data on tech. And for all the reasons we mentioned earlier, like I have a really hard time seeing how it could align the way I want my life to align. But that doesn't mean that that's, completely closed path. I think it's about knowing truths, going back to the values, like what are the truths, and living those truths. So if a truth for me is like, I really want to, lead with kindness, and I really want to like, whatever it is, then I really have to ask myself these questions of, okay, if I'm going down this alternate path, does that line up or not? Right now, like the food really feels like it lines up way better than tech.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people, especially people in like film and music and other things, where there's a lot of pressure as creatives to like make your passion and something that you find fun and enjoyable and gives you energy also be your source of income. And I've been hearing a lot more dialogue of people saying, hey, 50 years ago, people just had hobbies and that was okay. They didn't have side hustles. They sometimes just pursued a creative interest because it was fun for them and they didn't need it to become something or be something. And that can actually be counterintuitive to you following your passion and just enjoying the act of creating things. Do you feel any similar perspective about food and other things you're pursuing?
I think it's like, to me, it comes down to everyone needs to find it for themselves. It's like, I think that, finding a path where you continue to work and you keep your hobby just like this thing that you never have to monetize because you just love it. Um, Maybe that's right for someone. I think I'm going through the process right now of figuring that out. Like, to me, it's like, okay, either I could work my best hours, 30, 40 hours a week or more, doing something I don't love, and then like using the extra time for my hobbies, or I could be just doing that every single hour of the day. And with that, not, to me, it's like, I kind of want to just figure out if that could work. And if it could work, then like, I've seen for people that it has, and maybe for people it hasn't. So it's like, you kind of have to figure that out. And like, I think it's worth exploring to figure out, and not just like listen to someone else's story and their advice, because maybe it just wasn't right for them. And so I think it's like, if there's something that you really love doing and you can figure out a way to carve out some space for you to explore it, maybe like the conventional wisdom that people are telling you is just worth challenging and figuring out for yourself.
Yeah. Is that the advice you think you would give somebody who might listen to this and feel similar to how you were feeling a year ago, looking ahead, feeling misaligned with where they want to move? Would you just encourage them, hey, just explore? You don't even need to make a huge leap necessarily. Just allow yourself that freedom to pursue things and try things out.
I feel like oftentimes I'm in a period of my life where I get very excited when I come across an assumption I made at some point in my life that I can re-examine. And I've almost become like so excited about like, oh, this is some worldview that I have. Is that actually what I believe today? And I think very often there are these assumptions or ideas that we have in our head that are just there that actually aren't our own. At some point, maybe we made them on our own, but we're also changing. So we're constantly needing to re-examine those. But more often than not, it's some idea that someone else implanted in your head, whether it's society or someone that you trust or some, important influential figure or whatnot. And I don't subscribe to having views in your life that aren't your own. And so I think it's like any assumption, like in Berlin, there's like a lot of encouragement to just live your own life. And I think I very much have fed off of that. And it's like, okay, do I actually believe this still? Or how did that even get into my head? And I think any assumption that you've made, it's just like, it's worth kind of exploring it, and to prioritize, perhaps, like, because there's limitless amounts of things that you could kind of examine. It's like, lead with the things that kind of feel like important to explore. And so even just like doing a quick thought exercise of like, what are areas of my life that I want to think through, and just starting there. And then it's like, okay, what do I believe about this? And is that actually true? I think that's a really good use of time.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for talking with me. It's been so fun keeping this conversation going. Share a little bit about like what's next for Kenzy Club, and hopefully there's some listeners in Berlin that can hear about it and join, or they'll be in New York when you're doing pop-ups there, maybe.
So like the quick plug, it's just kenzy.club on Instagram. And right now, like I'm nothing has been concretely planned for the future. There's been some other bars who have reached out for pop-ups and things. So I do think there's like a few iterations of this lasagna pop-up that I want to explore. The supper club I do for my place is like a 5-course tasting menu that celebrates the time I spent in Italy. And so it's a little bit more of like an intimate setting. I host it from my loft. So there's it's just for 6 guests, and it's a really nice evening just to kind of connect with people and have tasty food. And open to like a bunch of different kind of catering opportunities. I'm like exploring a dinner for like a fashion gallery magazine.
Oh, cool.
Another like a couple of actually like fashion. Seems like there's fashion and food. Seems like a interesting mix. So kind of looking at a couple of those options as well. So and then just kind of taking it day by day.
Well, thanks again, Peter. It's been so much fun.
Thank you. I really you're really easy to talk to, and appreciate sort of you doing all the prep as well.
Thanks. That's good to hear.
Yeah. Cool.